Okay, now we've learned that what drives output is spending and what drives employment is output. So spending drives output, which drives employment, which drives income. And the important point is, let's think about a situation where the economy is in a position and the non-government sector, let's say households, decide to save more. Well, we've just learned that that will disturb the position, and if that persists, the economy would go towards recession. And that can be offset by government intervention in the form of increasing its, say, deficit. Now, let's think about what the government needs to do if it wants to, say, increase employment by a certain proportion. Well, the government needs to know two things. It first of all has to design its intervention, how much it's going to spend, and that depends upon a concept called the Expenditure Multiplier. So this is another tool that you're learning, and it's not an unimportant tool because it becomes very significant in some of the big policy debates and scandals in our more recent history. So what's the expenditure multiplier? Well, here's the thing. Let's say the government injects $100 extra into the economy, and you now know what that means. And so what impact does that have on the economy? Well, business firms get new orders for educational material or hospital supplies or whatever, and they respond to that $100 by producing an extra $100 of output, because spending drives output. And so in doing so, they have to hire extra workers and extra materials, and in doing that, that extra $100 of output produces an extra $100 of income initially. Now, the workers that enjoy that extra employment, what are they going to do? Well, we know that their consumption spending depends upon income. And so they've now got jobs and they've now got higher incomes. And so they go down after work to their local supermarket or down to their shop, their bar, they start spending the extra income. Now, what does that do? Well, that leads to an extra round of spending. And as a consequence, the workers have bought extra stuff in the supermarket or down the bar or gone to a sporting event or whatever. And those producers of those goods and services then enjoy extra sales. And as a consequence, they employ more people and produce more income. So this then becomes a sequential process. And at each stage of that process, the extra spending boost is getting smaller and smaller, because at each stage of the process, there are the leakages we talked about. Because savings is a function of income, people have to pay more taxes because there's now more activity. Not that tax rates have gone up, it's just that there's more people earning, and so tax revenue rises, and also imports rise. And so at each stage of the cycle, each additional injection into the spending stream is getting smaller and smaller until it gets to zero. And that's when we're back at a new equilibrium. Now the question is, what's the GDP at the end of that process in relation to the initial $100 injection of the government to stimulate the economy? Well, let's say it's 180. Well, then the expenditure multiplier is 1.8. And so now you understand what it means. It's the extra income or GDP that the economy will produce from a $1 injection into the spending stream that disturbs it. Now, why is this important? Well, let's think back to the Greek bailout in 2012, when the IMF, in conjunction with the European Commission, designed their so-called austerity program, which meant harsh cuts to government spending, which they told the Greek government and the rest of the world would actually end up producing more income. Now, what happened was that they imposed that austerity and the economy collapsed. And later that year, the IMF was forced to put out a document apologising and admitting that in their modelling that led to the bailout package and the austerity, that they had made a mistake with the multiplier. And in actual fact, the multiplier was about 1.6 or something. What does that mean? That means that if they cut government spending by €1, then overall economic GDP would drop by 1.6 euros. And so it was really easy to understand why the austerity destroyed their economy at that period. And so economists see the estimation of the expenditure multiplier as a very important thing to get right, and it's so susceptible to being miscalculated with devastating human consequences. That's why you need to understand what the multiplier is and how it's used.